Dr. Kissinger, I want to bring you into what may be the most dangerous moment in the Middle East since the wars of your era. Israel and the United States have conducted direct military strikes on Iran, targeting its nuclear infrastructure and military command positions. Iran has retaliated with missile and drone attacks on Israel. The region is closer to full-scale war than it has been in decades. I want your assessment.
Before your assessment, I need mine of the situation. Tell me, what was the stated objective of the strikes? Delay Iran's nuclear program? Regime change? Deterrence?
Officially, to eliminate Iran's nuclear weapons capability before it becomes irreversible. Israel's position is existential. A nuclear Iran is an unacceptable threat to its survival. The United States has supported the operation, framing it as a necessary act of non-proliferation.
And Iran's response?
Iran has declared it will not surrender its nuclear program. Its leadership frames the entire conflict as a civilizational defense against Western imperialism, against Israeli aggression, against what it calls a crusade to keep the Islamic world permanently subordinate. Its people, by many accounts, have rallied around the government in a way they had not in years.
Then the strikes have already failed strategically, regardless of what they destroyed physically. This is the first lesson of force in foreign policy, and it is the lesson that is most consistently forgotten. Military action that unites your adversary's population behind its government has strengthened your adversary, not weakened it. You may have set back their nuclear timeline. You have accelerated their nuclear will.
But the counter-argument from Israel is, what was the alternative? Allow Iran to reach nuclear capability and then negotiate from a position of permanent vulnerability?
That is a legitimate question, and I will not dismiss it. Israel's security situation is unlike any other nation on earth. It has no strategic depth. It cannot absorb a first strike the way the United States absorbed Pearl Harbor and recovered. I understand the existential calculus, but understanding it does not make the military solution correct. Let me ask you, did anyone before these strikes attempt serious direct negotiation with Iran? Not through intermediaries, not through sanctions alone. Direct, high-level, strategic engagement. The kind that says, we recognize your interests as a regional power, and we are prepared to discuss a framework in which your security is guaranteed without a nuclear weapon.
The JCPOA, the nuclear deal of 2015, attempted something like that. It was dismantled by the previous American administration and never fully restored.
Then you went to war, having first destroyed the diplomatic architecture that was your alternative to war. That is not strategy. That is the elimination of your own options, followed by surprise that only one option remains.
You've always operated from what many call realpolitik, the idea that foreign policy must be based on power and interest, not ideology or morality. From that framework, whose position is most rational here? Israel's, America's, or Iran's?
Each is rational within its own frame. Israel is rational, a nation that has been attacked repeatedly, that faces a neighbor openly calling for its elimination, that cannot afford to be wrong even once. The United States is rational. It has treaty obligations. It has regional interests. It has domestic political realities. Iran is rational. It watched what happened to Iraq when Saddam Hussein did not have a nuclear weapon. And it watched what happened to Libya when Gaddafi surrendered his. The lesson every mid-level power drew from those cases is identical. Nuclear weapons are the only guarantee against regime change by external force. The United States taught that lesson. It cannot now be shocked that the lesson was learned.
That is a remarkable thing to say, that American foreign policy effectively incentivized Iran's nuclear ambitions.
It is not remarkable. It is simply true, and it applies beyond Iran. The architecture of non-proliferation depends entirely on those without nuclear weapons, believing they are safer without them. The moment that belief is broken, as it was in Iraq and Libya, the architecture begins to collapse. This is not a defense of Iran. It is a diagnosis of how we arrived here.
Then what is the path forward? If military strikes harden Iranian resolve and the diplomatic framework has been dismantled, what does a strategist of your school prescribe?
3 things. First, stop, not permanently, but long enough to create space. A ceasefire is not a surrender. It is a recognition that the current trajectory ends in a regional war that serves no one's long-term interest, including Israel's. Second, China and Russia have influence in Tehran that Washington does not. A genuine great power diplomatic initiative involving all 5 permanent members of the Security Council is the only framework with enough weight to create a durable agreement. This requires the United States to accept that it cannot solve every problem unilaterally. That is not weakness. That is mathematics. Third, Iran must be offered something real, not just the removal of sanctions. A recognized role as a legitimate regional power, security guarantees, economic integration. Nations, like people, do not abandon weapons unless they believe they are safer without them. You must make that belief possible.
Critics would say that rewarding Iran with regional legitimacy after it has funded proxy wars, destabilized neighbors, and threatened Israel for decades is a moral obscenity.
I opened relations with China in 1972. China had killed American soldiers in Korea. China was funding North Vietnam. China was a revolutionary state, openly hostile to everything America represented. The moralists were horrified. 50 years later, that opening prevented a war between nuclear powers and reshaped the global order. Diplomacy that only engages virtuous nations is not diplomacy. It is a social club.
Final question. The human cost of this conflict is already severe. Iranian civilians, Israeli civilians, soldiers on multiple sides. From a purely ethical standpoint, not strategic, how do you weigh that?
Every decision I made in my career cost lives. I know that. I have lived with it. The ethical question in statecraft is never whether suffering will occur. It always does. The question is whether the suffering purchases a durable outcome that prevents greater suffering later. If these strikes end in a wider war, if Iran acquires nuclear weapons under fire with a population united behind its government, then the suffering will have purchased not security, but catastrophe. That is the ethical verdict I cannot yet deliver. History will deliver it. It always does. And it is never gentle.